Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, November 15th, 2016. The Trump transition hits some turbulence. I mean, the Donald has only hired 2 people so far, and he's fired more people than that from his transition team. It's going to be a rocky 4 years. Thanks for clicking on and listening to my daily news and comment podcast. It's now available on YouTube. Just enter Peter B. Collins in the search window, and I find that YouTube is available to a lot of people on their devices, their smartphones, and apps, and we've picked up listeners in far-flung portions of the globe. So Thailand and Sri Lanka, good to have you listening. Well, as I mentioned, the Trump transition has already hit some bumpy spots, and we only know of 2 people who've actually been given jobs, Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon. But already, Chris Christie's been fired as head of the transition team. Mike Pence, who is running the new effort, has failed to sign the documents that the White House requires for him to be officially included in the communications about the transition. Mike Rogers, who was an advisor on national security issues, a real knuckle-dragging Republican who used to be on the House Intelligence Committee, well, he was asked to leave. We're not told exactly why. And other allies of Chris Christie have been bumped off of this bus. And it appears that the Trump kids, Ivanka and Donald Jr. and Eric, who have been named to the transition team, may already be having some influence because reportedly Ivanka went to a meeting last Thursday, and it was on Friday that the departure of Chris Christie was announced. So I don't have any, evidence that connects those two, but it does appear that the kids are there to be the eyes and ears and sometimes the mouthpiece for their papa. One of the most brilliant comments has come from Ben Carson, the retired neurosurgeon who slept his way through the primary debates, begging people to attack him so he would be recognized to speak. And he honestly responded to a reporter saying, I don't have any government experience. Now, that raises a big question about why the fuck he was running for president, but it's refreshing to hear him say that I'm going to pass on being head of the Health and Human Services Department because I'm a surgeon. I don't have any experience at that. Now, his official statement was, the way I'm leaning is to work from the outside and not from the inside. I want to have the freedom to work on many issues and not be pigeonholed into one particular area. Yeah, right. And get this, Eliot Cohen, who, to be fair, is a Republican establishment figure with ties to the Bush administration, and he's one of the people who led the charge of Republicans who publicly opposed Donald Trump. And despite that, friends said, hey, you've got experience in Washington. Why don't you file your resume with the transition team? So Eliot Cohen did that, and after one interaction with them, he was prompted to tweet thusly today. After exchange with Trump transition team, changed my recommendation. Stay away. They're angry, arrogant, screaming, you lost. Will be ugly. So this is amusing on a certain level, but I think it is predictive. And I only watched maybe a total of 30 minutes of the Apprentice TV show just to kind of figure out what they did there. And I heard Donald Trump say the famous phrase, you're fired. And I believe that this will be a very turbulent administration. And I've suggested this before, that bullies like Chris Christie will be driving many issues and many people in the direction of where they think Donald Trump wants them to go. But he is so unpredictable that one false move and, baby, you're under the bus. Now, maybe they'll get their shit together and all get on the same page, but I doubt it. And I think we're going to see just a lot of victims of the Trump administration. Now, amid the widespread uncertainty, reports the Washington Post, coordination between Trump's transition team and the Obama White House is on hold until Mike Pence will sign a key document. And this is a memorandum of understanding that is common. It's required by law. And we're not sure why Pence is unable to sign it. Maybe he's negotiating special terms, no brown M&Ms. Also, I learned from Rachel Maddow last night that Mike Pence is staying on as governor of Indiana until his term expires in early January, and I'm not sure if that means anything or not. Now, as a matter of practice, and I reserve the right to make exceptions, I don't plan to talk about each person whose name surfaces for a job in the Trump administration. I will slam them once they're finally nominated or, put on an official list. And the exception I'll make right now is for Rudy Giuliani. They were thinking of naming him Attorney General. He now has ruled that out. He will not be Attorney General, but they're thinking about him for Secretary of State. And the other figure who was named is John Bolton. Now, these are two people who have fundamental problems with diplomacy, which is the main mission of the State Department. And I've got to scratch my head when I hear these rumors or reports floated. Yesterday, I mentioned the serious conflicts of interest that are apparent between the Trump enterprises and his role as a president of the United States. And I don't think anybody at the New York Times listened to my podcast, but there's a story today that follows along these lines. And they report that the Trump International Hotel right down Pennsylvania Avenue presents a looming conflict of interest. That building is owned by the government, by the General Services Administration, and Trump will be appointing the head of that agency. He's also going to name the members of the National Labor Relations Board. And his hotel and casino in Las Vegas has been locked in a long-running struggle with the NLRB over union organizing and related issues in Nevada. And further complicating matters are Trump's decision to name his children to the transition team after telling us that they were the blind trust who would run the Trump organizations without consulting their father, without involving him, and that would be just as good as an arm's-length blind trust run by a third party. Now, this is obviously false. And to complicate things further, Trump's idea to put the kids on the transition team, which, as I said, may have led to the early departure of Chris Christie, well, this presents a new level of conflict of interest because the junior Trumps say that, oh, gosh, they're just going to run the business. They're not going to be part of the government. And then they're on the transition team. Well, that's part of the administration. It's not a paid government position, but it is part of the administration. And then we have the story reported and denied that Donald Trump has requested top-level security clearances for Donald, Eric, and Ivanka. Now, if they're going to be running the Trump businesses, why do they need security clearances? Is it because they want to get the first classified info on business opportunities or negative developments that might affect their investments around the world? This is really troubling, and it shows that they're clueless about the need to separate their private interest from the public interest. Now, the USA Today is reporting that the transition team denies that Donald Trump asked for security clearances for the 3 grown children. Barron and Melania were never included on the list or the declaration that that's not true. So we'll see how this plays out. But it raises more questions, and there's nobody attempting to answer them. Yesterday, I led the News and Comment podcast with 9 ways that Barack Obama paved the way for a Trump presidency. And one of the things I talked about was his expansion of presidential powers, and that Donald Trump will inherit those powers. Spencer Ackerman, writing in The Guardian today, says that the Obama administration will not tighten its self-imposed rules about drone strikes in advance of Donald Trump's inauguration. Trump will inherit the Obama targeted killing plan, the so-called drones playbook, that was announced in May 2013 as presidential policy guidance. Now, these rules are meaningless. These are guidelines that Obama wrote for himself after he had violated them. And Ackerman writes, while the White House considers its standards for drone strikes to be scrupulous, much of the rest of the world considers them to represent an arbitrary, secret, and dangerous apparatus of secret killing that Trump will soon have at his disposal. So he gets in a Twitter fight with somebody and then says, well, just send a missile from a Raptor and take him out. And as you know, I'm very concerned about this. In a similar vein, Kevin Gosztola, the bright young journalist who publishes at shadowproof.com, has an excellent piece that I've linked to in the show file for my podcast today, entitled The Complicity of Obama, Democrats Set Stage for Dangerous Trump Presidency. And this echoes some of the things that I've been talking about, that the expansion of power that is not authorized by Congress in a declaration of war or any other measure is, as Gosztola points out, a dangerous kind of bipartisanship, exemplified by the fact that Obama refused to prosecute officials in the Bush administration for torture. And as you can tell, I agree with Gosztola that these failures will enable, if not embolden, a President Trump to resume torture, to expand the types of barbarous tactics used on people they're trying to brutally pump information out of. Gosztola continues, in addition to impunity for torture, the failure of liberals to challenge Obama means Trump will have a targeted assassination program and flying killer robots to kill any terrorism suspect or enemies that he puts on either of the kill lists established by Obama. He will have a massive global surveillance apparatus, which NSA whistleblower Snowden exposed to the world, that remains more powerful than ever in spite of a few minor reforms. He will have structures in place to build on Obama's record of deportation of immigrants, more than 2.5 million deported under Obama. Then there are the whistleblowers who have been attacked ruthlessly by Obama, and you can't expect Trump to be any nicer. And the first person other than me to raise this, Gosztola says it must also be kept in mind that Obama passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which contains a provision that enables the indefinite detention of individuals. It remains in force under Trump unless Obama rolls it back, and he will not have the ability to do that because no legislation will be presented to him that might allow that. So I give Gosztola credit here. Also, if you click on the link and go to Shadowproof, be sure to read Gosztola's brilliant takedown of Newsweek and Vanity Fair reporter Kurt Eichenwald, who exposed himself as just a shill for the Clinton campaign. And Eichenwald recently had a tangle with a fan of his at an airport who he told to go F that person's self. And, Kevin Gosztola returns the favor there. It's a really delicious read. Take a moment to click on over there and check it out. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who enable my podcast here with your subscription dollars. People like Abby McMillan, Paul Tomaselli, Cynthia Von Hendricks, and Natalie Reel. They are subscribers, and I invite you to join them. Just go to peterbcollins.com. When you find the menu button, click on it. It pulls down and you click on Become a Subscriber. That takes you to the sign-up page, and you're on your way. You can choose $5, $10, $20 a month, a one-time contribution of any amount, or our $50 annual subscription that earns you a bonus book, and they are displayed on the sign-up page. President Obama is on his farewell tour, a taxpayer expense trip, and he landed in Athens, Greece, the cradle of democracy, where he offered more pointed comments than he did in a news conference before he left Washington yesterday. He said, I do believe, separate and apart from any particular election or movement, that we're going to have to guard against a rise in a crude sort of nationalism or ethnic identity or tribalism that is built around an us and a them. In the United States, he continued, we know what happens when we start dividing ourselves along lines of race or religion or ethnicity. It's dangerous, not just for the minority groups that are subjected to that kind of discrimination, or in some cases, in the past, violence, I would add the present, but because we don't then realize our potential as a country when we're preventing blacks or Latinos or Asians or gays or women from fully participating in the project of building American life. And a little later, he said, globalization combined with technology, combined with social media and constant information, have disrupted people's lives, sometimes in a very concrete way. So social media is the problem? Well, it has problems, and we'll get to that in a moment, but Obama was there with the embattled Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, who was forced by the international banking community to impose desperate austerity measures on the troubled nation of Greece. And Obama did say that he's going to talk to his friends in Europe. He's on his way to Berlin tomorrow about forgiving more of the debt of the nation of Greece. That would be a nice gesture. Now, here's a reminder of one of the big failures of the Obama administration. One of the highest courts in Egypt has overturned a death sentence imposed on the former elected president, the first democratically elected president of Egypt in modern history, Mohamed Morsi. And the New York Times fails to note that he was ejected in a military coup in 2013. It simply reads, Morsi was the country's first democratically elected president and was ousted in 2013 by the military. Well, it was a coup, pure and simple, but that word has never crossed Obama's lips in relation to Egypt. And he supports the military dictator who is worse than Mubarak, who Obama helped ease out of office during the brief Arab Spring. And Morsi, who is known to be a leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, was elected and supported by the United States until General Sisi arranged for this coup, and Obama said, well, you know, there were protests all over the country, so we have to listen to that. And this is one of the most shameful moments in Obama's presidency. They didn't even offer Morsi the baby dock exit. You know, here's a villa in the south of France. And I think that it's extremely shameful that the U.S. has continued to support the military dictator there and the dictatorship that it represents, suppression of rights. It's a really ugly scene. And Obama is silent on all of those issues. Over in The Hague, Den Haag, as they say in the Netherlands, the United States and the CIA, our armed forces and the CIA, may be the targets of war crimes charges. Now, this is something that I don't take any pleasure in because the United States has avoided signing on to the International Criminal Court. We're above the law. And the United States has failed to acknowledge, to investigate and prosecute the clear war crimes that led to the invasion of Iraq and led to the torture regime, the way we detained individuals without charge or trial. Clearly, war crimes were committed. But we pretend that since we're not a party to the court, we're above the law, and we can simply make the rules and enforce them if we wish. But there's a clause in the treaty that established the International Criminal Court, and it permits a country like Afghanistan, which is a signatory, to bring charges against the United States. And we know that people were held at the salt pit at Bagram Air Force Base outside of Kabul, and that's where some of these individuals were tortured. So to me, this is a clear case that invites investigation, and it should lead to criminal charges. The real embarrassing shame is that we have not in any way acknowledged our violations of international treaties and our own laws in the war crimes that were obviously committed. In Syria, the combat is heating up again. Turkish warplanes struck Islamic State positions in northern Syria on Monday. Russian fighter jets were back in the skies today. And also the Syrian military has been attacking a hospital in the town of Atareb in northern Syria. Russia is accusing rebels of using chemical weapons, saying that at least 30 Syrian soldiers have been poisoned in a recent attack. And the Russian airstrikes are focused on Aleppo, and this is the first time they've been hitting that area since mid-October. So clearly the combat is heating up, and during this interim period between presidents is when adventures and opportunism often surface, as I mentioned yesterday in relation to Israel. And a United Nations envoy, the guy in charge of Syria, Staffan de Mistura, has warned that a total military victory for the Assad government without a negotiated peace deal will leave Syria and Europe exposed to resurgent Sunni terrorism. He says, quote, solely concentrating on a military victory will lead to a Pyrrhic victory followed by a long-term, low-intensity but extremely painful guerrilla war in which Syrians will continue to die. You will create a space in which within 3 months there will be more people joining Islamic State. You will not win them over unless there is a political solution. Now, as you know, I think Obama has had a failed policy, imagining that we can take down the Assad government and defeat the Islamic State at the same time, and then what? Nobody has offered any path forward as to how Syria would be more than a failed state with different little warlord groups controlling certain areas. And so while this is a dirty mess, and there are many covert actions that have led to it that haven't been fully disclosed, it appears to me that we ought to back off from the twin goals, acknowledge that the Syrian government will stay in place, and deal with that at a later time. But I think the warning from de Mistura is worth noting. And in Iraq, the Mosul offensive is continuing, but Daesh, the Islamic State, is still a very wily opponent and enemy, and they launched 2 surprise attacks, one in Fallujah that the Baghdad government says Baghdad. I'm in the right country. The Baghdad government says they have complete control of. Well, there were car bombings there yesterday, and at least 6 people were killed. Also in the holy city of Karbala, which is allegedly under control of the Baghdad government, there was a separate suicide bombing attack that killed 6, and this is during a pilgrimage of Islamic faithful Shiites that is underway in Iraq right now. Back here in the United States, the action on the Dakota Access Pipeline has heated up again. Kelsey Warren, who is the CEO of the pipeline company Energy Transfer Partners, has filed suit in a federal court asking for immediate approval for construction under the Missouri River at Lake Oahe. And on Monday, the Corps of Engineers announced that it needed additional discussion and analysis, including consultations with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, before it would issue a final permit for the pipeline to drill on Army land under the river. So this is still contentious. But Kelsey Warren believes that with his investor Donald Trump, the president-elect, that's right, Trump has at least $500,000 invested in the Energy Transfer Partners business. This is another serious conflict of interest. But Kelsey Warren, who's also under attack by the music community in Austin, Texas, where he lives, said, I'm 100% sure that the pipeline will be approved by a Trump administration. Now to the issue of fake news being posted on the Internet. Yesterday, both Google and Facebook announced a crackdown. Google said that it'll ban websites that peddle fake news from using its online advertising service. That takes the profit motive out of it. And Facebook updated the language in its ad policy, which already says it won't display ads in sites that show misleading or illegal content, including fake news sites. Now, this is a good move. But as pointed out in a powerful op-ed in today's New York Times, written by Zeynep Tufekci, and Tufekci, let me see, is a professor at the University of North Carolina School of Information and Library Science. And he makes some good points. That Mark Zuckerberg is in denial when he says that the fake news stories didn't have any impact on the election. And Tufekci uses Facebook's own research to contradict the recent comments by Zuckerberg, noting that in 2010, researchers working with Facebook conducted an experiment on 61 million users right before the midterm election. One group was shown a Go Vote message as a plain box, while another group saw the same message with a tiny addition, thumbnail pictures of their Facebook friends who had clicked on I voted. And using public voter rolls, they showed that the second post had turned out hundreds of thousands of voters. So there's more evidence in here that you can read for yourselves. What I find disappointing about this article is that it focuses only on the fake news that was published in the interests of the Trump campaign. And there was all sorts of fake news on Facebook that was being ginned up by the Correct the Record PAC, run by David Brock, who also controls Media Matters. And Brock also controls an outlet called Blue Nation Review that was publishing false and misleading stuff about Bernie Sanders while he was still in the race, and then false and misleading information about Trump in the final stretch of the campaign. I think we need to be fair about the manipulation practiced by both sides in this campaign. Yesterday, we learned the sad news that Gwen Ifill, the first African-American woman to anchor a network news program, the PBS NewsHour, has died after a one-year battle with cancer at the young age of 61. And I have a lot of respect for the work that Gwen Ifill did. There have been a lot of praise and almost no criticism. The only criticism I have is that Gwen Ifill I found captive to a Beltway mentality. She was very deferential to powerful people. And she participated in one episode of the PBS NewsHour that I know a little background about. When Russell Tice, the NSA whistleblower, was interviewed by that show, he was told that his interview was going to be broadcast the following night. A week later, it was finally aired, or at least parts of it were, but they hacked up his comments and eliminated the very damaging allegations that he made that the NSA had put surveillance on elected leaders. That is the important issue that we broke on this program over 3 years ago. And at the PBS NewsHour, they edited out those comments from Russ Tice, and they allowed an NSA attorney to come on and rebut them, but he wasn't in the presence of Russ Tice, even though the show was edited in a manner to suggest that. So I honor the work of Gwen Ifill, but I also must say that her work stayed inside the consensus lines of the Washington Beltway, at least in all the instances that I observed. And finally, I want to honor my friend Richard Rappaport, the journalist who passed away almost a month ago. He garnered a great obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle today, and if you're so inclined, I have linked to it in the last item of the show file for today's podcast, and I hope you will read it and honor my friend Richard, who did a lot of great work over the years. Thanks for joining me for my News and Comment podcast today. As you know, it's available on YouTube, and I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.